Hello, I'm Irinel. I'm a student of architecture here at the Vienna University of Technology. Over the past few years, I've attended quite a few courses at the ATTP. My first one was a seminar course in 2018 in regard to my bachelor thesis. Then my recent one is actually ongoing. It's another seminar that I'm pursuing this semester, Lighthouses on the Digital Continent. And then, of course, in between there have been other courses, master module seminars, research groups, and so on. So I've been attached to the ATTP for, let's say, the last 3 years or so. Yeah. Well, when talking about expectations, well, that depends really on the point in time, because with each course the expectations were different, I guess. So, I mean, the me from 3 years ago would say that there were no actual expectations, or if there were any, they were only internal. So I was only concerned with my being there, with me being conscientious about writing a good bachelor thesis. In regard to the ATTP, what I can say, however, it's concerning the unexpected. So after that first seminar, I started growing an appetite for these kind of things. And as with any appetite, it needs to be satisfied. So by the beginning of the next semester, I was already enrolled at a block seminar organized by the ATTP. And then I found myself in the attendance at the Sophistication Conference and wrote a report on all the lectures. Then I finally enrolled in the master module, Meta Architecture, which eventually helped me to a position of teaching assistant here. So with each course I did, my interest, my appetite has grown, and with it the expectations have been growing as well, both from myself and from what I was up for in terms of, you know, learning and creating, thinking, exploring. So, yeah. Yeah, well, I wish I could recommend these courses to everyone. Ideally, it would be that everyone could get a taste of being a student at the ATTP. Realistically, however, I can only recommend the courses to those who are in possession of the virtue of patience. Because just for the sake of being a bit controversial, it takes time, really, to get accustomed to not being comfortable 98% of the time. So to constantly be kept on your toes, on the edge of your seat, mentally, intellectually, you have a bit of a struggle, really, because otherwise there would be no growth. So, but then the benefits, I believe, are enormous. Yeah, so just to briefly present some of my works that I did at the ATTP so far, I think out of all the works that I did at the ATTP, these 3 stand out. So my bachelor thesis in ray diagram, the apology of the abstract machine, then the collection of writings for the substitute course, and the artifact I created for the CAT course. Right, so in ray diagram, the apology of the abstract machine. For this one, I thought it best to start by reading the abstract. So, charged with corrupting the youth and not believing in the gods in whom the city believes, but in other daimonia that are novel to Athens, Socrates gives an apology, a speech that is less a plea for forgiveness and more a defense of philosophy and the life of virtue. This acts as a motivic key for my paper. It is not that a justification for the use of diagrammatic thinking, whether more Persian or more Deleuzian in nature, must be given or is even needed, and it is not that it has to be defended against other tools or methodologies, but its perusal could give an insight on why we favor it over others, reductio ad abstractum seems to be the architect's finest weapon. The power of the diagram does not lie in its reductiveness, not anymore, but in its performative prowess and generative fearlessness to condone creativity. Thus, the apologia that this paper would aim for concerns the ethical aesthetics of diagrammatic thinking. It investigates the abstract and its machinations. Right, so the starting point for this paper, interestingly enough, was not Socrates' apology, not directly, although as it reads in the abstract, I did make use of it in the paper. No, the starting point actually in conceiving the topic for the paper was a book I was reading at that time and have reread a couple of times since, by a British mathematician, Godfrey Hardy, A Mathematician's Apology. He was obviously inspired himself by Socrates, as was I, but what inspired me with Hardy was a certain formulation, namely, reductio ad absurdum is a mathematician's finest weapon. And that was my eureka moment when I was putting the paper together, because I just started playing around with this formulation. So instead of a reductio ad absurdum, we would have a reductio ad abstractum, and the mathematician then would be substituted for the architect. And then the rest was a question of investigating this notion of the abstract and mainly its machinations in the embodiment of the diagram and of the diagrammatic thinking, and how they transposed into architecture. And the main point really, as it reads in the abstract, is that its power, the power of the diagram, isn't lying with the reductiveness, but with its performative prowess and its generative fearlessness to condone creativity. And this I found best with Gilles Deleuze and his conception of the abstract machine, which in its turn propelled me back towards architecture. So how does this diagrammatic thinking reflect in there? How does architecture play with the abstract machine? How do they feed into each other? And then what's the offspring of that? What are we to expect of it, and so on? So maybe just for closing, two short passages. The first one would be the beginning of what I called in the paper a fold, named here Deus ex machina, machining the abstract, and the subsection reductio ad abstractum. So it reads, the abstract machine's engagement with the architectural discourse is not devoid of polemics. Its employment instills the new and exhausts it. This quest for the exhaustive bequeaths several plateaus of differentiation, which in turn exposes several variations and interpretations of the phenomenon the abstract machine esteems as its legacy. Architecture, now seeking the architectonics of continuous variation and movement, has entities that form, deform, and reform, in flows in a molecular realm of becoming, in abstract diagrams, machines, on an immanent plane of existence. And then the second passage is precisely the last paragraph of the paper from the conclusion, so quod erat demonstrandum. What is philosophy? Echoes through Socrates' mind as he closes in on his cup of poisoned hemlock. And further, in the minds of his followers, Plato, Aristotle, and even further to Descartes, Kant, Spinoza, Foucault, Deleuze, Guattari, and many others. It was Whitehead who said that the European philosophical tradition consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. The abstract machine, a Deleuze-Guattarian construct, with its inherent diagrammaticism, goes beyond Deleuze and Guattari, beyond philosophy, into architecture and beyond. And in that beyond, with the help of the abstract machine, as Rem Koolhaas claims, architecture can become a way of thinking about anything, the diagram of everything. Yeah. This was my bachelor thesis in re-diagram, the apology of the abstract machine. Then, with a collection of poems in the substitute course, the story is quite different. So the framework in this case was display of substitution within the outlays of rhetorics and poetics. So these exercises in progymnasmata. And the object at stake was Gertrude Stein's poem, The Box. The question being, what's in the box? And in my case, I tried to keep it coy for as much as I could. So the reader was to be kept most of the time outside the box. So my first exercises was named exactly that, unknown. Then in the next exercise, I would acknowledge it as an object, but I would equate it with an X, a hint to it as being a cipher of sorts. And then I would try to engage with such a cipher from various angles. This eventually led me to thinking of the contents of the box, of this cipher, simply as thought itself. So it was about something volatile, unsteady, yet ready to take form. And ultimately, this would turn into the object of poetic thought. Right. And for this object of poetic thought, I thought it best to just read a short abstract. So, Ars Poetica, essay on an object of poetic thought. Whatever necessary to flesh itself out, its form gets to be as elusive as a shadow, yet as obtrusive as a cloud on a sunny day. What is the object of poetic thought? Where does it start? When? And how does it end? These are but obtuse interrogations of our lettered selves. On a plane of unindexed immanence, full of potentia, it awaits a rummage, it expects a quake, the poetic thought. And once claimed, oniric debris, a splintering void, a starlit mirrored sea, a light-made maze with veils of looking glass and threads of fleshy smoke, an object of poetic thought. Right. And this eventually became the Nightingale Leads essay. And in this essay, I tried to engage with this idea of an object of poetic thought by bringing it under a certain pressure. What I did, I took the synopsis of the tragic story of Philomela and her sister Procne from Ovid's Metamorphoses, which allowed me to create a narrative for this pressure, what I could push towards engaging the limitations of language, or how I call it in sync with the story, a severed lingua, and then an overcoming of the obstacles it presents. And all this happened in a play of substitution by invention, as well as a coding and decoding, if you will, and above all, a domestication of thought. So if I'm allowed, I will just finish this expose by reading the beginning of the essay. So, Nightingale Leads, essay on the object of poetic thought. Fleeing from him, they seemed to rise on wings, and it was true, for they had changed to birds. Ovid, Metamorphoses. As the coldness of the blade swept swiftly upon her tongue, her tears fell also there, where the blood fell, and her words fell, and her enthralling song fell too. In her brittle darkness, silence supplanted her cries, and mutilated, she could not communicate with anyone to tell her injuries and tragic woe. There, where her blood fell, there fell also her tears. But even in despair and utmost grief, there is an ingenuity which gives inventive genius to protect from harm. There fell her words. The grief-distracted Philomela wove in a warp with purple marks and white a story of the crime. There, where her enthralling song fell too. This was my collection of writings from the from the substitute course. And then the third one, from the CAD course, the approach was again one of substitution. The task was to come up with an artifact for a certain persona using the different tools we had at hand. So machine learning, the notebooks, and then the image libraries and so on. So the person I had chosen was Julian Assange. He's quite a controversial figure. And for my artifact, what I did was to create a newspaper, which was not really a newspaper, as Assange was not really a journalist either. So my approach was to pick up aspects of his life, which I had found interesting and well documented in the few biographies I had read about him, and then these aspects to put them in the background and only highlight them through excerpts from various literary sources. So as theoretical underpins, just to justify my intention, I conceived of it as a network of heterotopic reflections. So by means of a Deleuzian understanding of the Foucauldian concept of the dispositif. So in this regard, for example, Assange as a fanatic figure would be best mirrored by Captain Ahab. An ambitious Assange will be mirrored by Julien Sorel, then an uncompromising Assange by Howard Rourke, and so on. So without getting involved in the narrative, I was trying to tell his story without even talking about him at all. So I tried to engage a historicity through an objective subjectivity. These are, I suppose, three of my favorite projects I did while attending courses at the ATTP. How do I remember the courses? I will not personally go and explain for each course how it felt or how I remember it felt, but as a general feeling, even today I'm always terrified because, as I was saying earlier, I know it will put me in a position of discomfort, somewhere where I need to be to exceed my limits. So in thinking, it's always about this gymnastics in thinking. And yeah, but do not get me wrong, I'm also in awe and I'm also inspired. So without trying to get in trouble here, there's really only one word I can think of to describe this conglomerate of feelings. So, and that word would be sublime. Yeah, it's sublime. Then what I took away from the courses, yeah, well, again, with the risk of being a little bit cheeky, I'm going to say that it's not really about what you take. It's more about what you bring to the table. So if you do not bring anything to the table, might as well not even come, because for sure you will leave empty-handed. So I have been taking what I have been giving. I believe this is how the ATTP works and why it works so well. So there's a bilateral understanding at work in here. What am I doing today? Well, above all, I am pursuing my degree in architecture. I'm also currently working here at the ATTP as a teaching assistant, helping the ATTP run smoothly. And also here at the ATTP, I am coordinating a little project we have put together with a few other tutors in the department, with Jakob Lindlof and with Ruslan Dimov and with Devi Papo. It's called the FORGE, which is an acronym for the Forum for Gnomonic Exploits. I will not go into the concept of it, but just to keep it short and to give a taste of it, it's a place, a chamber, mainly for students to engage in discussion and in talking, and then to get creative about whatever they try to discuss. So yeah, we've only started earlier this year, but we're glad to have set course, and so far it's been fruitious, and we're glad that other people are joining us already. Yeah, so this would be pretty much all from my side. Thank you.